Wouldn't it be wonderful if each relationship in our lives were transparent, authentic, and understandable? Well, the truth is that relationship pitfalls are the hardest to see in the relationships that matter the most to us. Good people with the best of intentions still disagree. When you get to an emotional place in an argument, when you feel vulnerable, the reality is that you are reacting with your inner child. Psychology Today says that the emotional part of us is and will always be in the custody of our inner child. Scary thought, I know. That really complicates relationships in adulthood because the moment a conversation turns emotional, instead of responding as adults, we are likely responding with our inner child, likely to be encountering someone else's inner child as well. Developmentally, children progress through these different stages and only know how to make sense of their world by relating it back to themselves. You can see this when you observe children whose parents, for example, are going through divorce. They often blame themselves. They think that their parents' divorce must have occurred over them, something that they did do, something that they didn't do. We know this. So you might think that the answer to not getting over emotional in a relationship is to confront and fully separate from that vulnerable child inside of each of us. But research indicates that's not true. They say that diving into that inner child and what makes us feel vulnerable may instead hold the keys to emotional and relational health. Psychology Today says that when you are truly able to get in compassionate touch with that tender and exquisitely vulnerable part of you, so susceptible to being disappointed, disturbed, or disheartened, you can appropriately respond then, rather than to automatically react and to perceive provocations in the past that may have thrown you off balance. A couple of tips on that for couples. Number one, realize that it is okay for couples to disagree on some things. There's no prerequisite out there that says you have to have absolute harmony on everything in order to stay a couple. Number two, irreconcilable differences does not mean you're not compatible with your spouse. Let that sink in for a moment. Number three, there is power, believe it or not, in vulnerability. It doesn't feel powerful, but it can be powerful. The power of being vulnerable comes from integrating what you know as an adult in terms of your strengths and your flaws so that you can go into potentially emotional moments with the self-soothing ability to distinguish childlike reactions from chosen and preferred, of course, adult responses. This self-validation and awareness of who you really are can act as an insulator against insecurities that might otherwise get the best of you in the heat of the moment. Dr. Leon Seltzer says that once we're self-validating, we then become emotionally ready to take full, unmitigated responsibility for ourselves, even for our least admirable parts and the parts of us that we may not like as well. We all have those parts. Once we have a grip on how to master disagreement in our most foundational relationships, that is, as couples, as parents, as friends, and other things, our professional relationships can improve as well. And we might even find it easier to relate to those who disagree with what Dr. Jonathan Haidt calls sacred pillars. Haidt says the question most people ask about politics is, why doesn't the other side listen to reason? We all think we're the reasonable ones. Well, his response is that we were never designed to listen to reason. I've explained before cognitive dissonance on this show, and he agrees. He says the problem people don't listen to reason is that they weren't programmed to listen to reason. And the sort of reason that is most often employed in the world of politics is more like a lawyer or a press secretary, justifying our acts and judgments to others rather than really trying to understand. In other words, placing it in that file and then rationalizing why you did it is what most people do, and they call it reasoning. The New York Times summarizes Haidt's theory like this: if you want to change minds, don't appeal to someone's reason. Appeal to reason's boss.